Greetings and welcome back to the Old Ways Rising Farm YouTube channel. Today we're going to do another video on some permaculture design ideas with a model. This model is from ancient history and not super ancient, kind of contemporary with early medieval time. We'll talk about that. And is talking about water on a very grand scale. Now, if you've been around landscape design or permaculture design for literally more than 5 minutes, you've heard people talk about the importance of water. Again, I like to do this kind of conversation with real examples. The example we're going to have is a very, as I said a minute ago, a very grand example, manipulating water across a large landscape with a huge investment of time and effort put into it. But there are, even if you don't have a landscape that's amenable to this type of management, and frankly few are, there are ideas here that are universally applicable. There are, heuristics and thought processes that you can take and apply at a smaller scale in your own landscape, okay? So what we're going to talk about is a model of an archaeological site from the Altiplano of Peru and Bolivia. And this is found on the Tiwanaku state, is a culture that existed at its height from about 400 to 1000 Common Era. Okay? So this is contemporary with just after the fall of Rome, with Byzantium at its height, with Anglo-Saxon England, with the Caliphate at its height in North Africa and the Middle East. So that's kind of the time period we're talking. The structures we're talking about are extraordinarily difficult to date precisely, but they fall within this general time period. Okay? This is found along the southern shore of Lake Titicaca, which is up on the Altiplano, as I said, and the key word in Altiplano is plain, right? This is a very flat site. So unlike the last ones where we're talking about, topographic features and how they're used, in this case, it is so flat, there were really no topo lines, and I just modeled it on a flat surface, okay? So it's extraordinarily flat, and that's why this is kind of a, not everybody's going to have this type of habitat to work with. A little bit of cultural context here before we get into the model. Tiwanaku is on the southern end of Lake Titicaca. It is the highest elevation navigable lake in the world. It is the largest lake in South America, so we're not talking about a small body of water. We're talking about something that is comparable to the smaller Great Lakes here in North America. And the Great Lakes, Lake Baikal, we're waterways on this scale, but very high elevation. So we are dealing with the edges, the periphery of a very massive body of water. Tiwanaku was the culture at the southern end of this body of water. The Wari Empire was the culture at the northern end of this body of water. And after around 1000 Common Era, we end up with those cultures being kind of encompassed by the Inca Empire, which is the one more people are familiar with. But these two cultures, they interacted on reasonably good terms, intermarried, shared royalty, and form the technological foundation for what would become Incan architecture, waterworks, and technology. Okay, so this is the foundation of the more famous, more modern empire, right? So it's a really interesting time in history. That's about all I'm going to say on the specific archaeology. This is not really my area of expertise in archaeological terms. So beyond that, I have some friends that are experts in this, and I'm sure there will be some comments saying, hey, Adam, fix this, right? Some of the little details here. But that's okay. I welcome those comments. Please go ahead and write them, and while you're doing it, give this video a like so others can see it. Now, the citation, this is not an open access paper, unlike the last two models, but this is the citation information. I will also retype the full citation in the the description box, so if you want to go get it, you can. It is not open access, but it is in the JSTOR database. So any library with JSTOR access can get this for you directly or as an interlibrary loan. So if you want to look at this article, it shouldn't be hard to find. But you will have to do a little bit more than just download it, unless you have your own access to an academic library or JSTOR itself. But you shouldn't have to go and break through a paywall. You should be able to work with a local library to get this if you want to read the source article. The model is based on figure 2 of this article. The title is The Technology and Organization of Agricultural Production in the Tiwanaku State. Alan Kolata is the author. Latin American Antiquity is the journal, and it was published in '91. Okay? So I will retype all of this in the description box if you want to go and read the article directly yourself, which I would recommend. It's a very wonderful article. Okay, let's look at the model and what's going on here. Okay, are you zoomed in, beloved? Okay, so as you can see, this is absolutely flat as pancake. I didn't have a good enough topographic map to work with this, but when I looked at this general area, this site on Google Maps, there wasn't going to be more than 5 or 10 feet change in elevation, and the site was heavily modified, so that would have probably been graded down by the process of building these canal structures and building up the raised beds. So there's no. This is modeled at 1 to 480, so it's a slightly smaller scale. Well, it's half the size. Half the scale is the previous, okay? Previous 2 models that you've seen, which were all done at 240. 1 to 240. And at this scale, the slight change in topography would not have even have been modelable, right? So this is pretty much dead flat, okay? Now, what's going on here is a very interesting adaptation to high elevation, dry agriculture. Okay? The Altiplano is a very, very dry region. It is on the edge of really the world's driest desert. Okay? It is the arable land at the periphery of the world's driest desert. When you get up to this elevation, you're getting so high that clouds can literally not reach that high. Okay? And there are regions in the Atacama Desert where we know from the mineralization at the surface that some regions of this, some regions of the Atacama Desert are so dry that they have not received more than 2 to 4 millimeters of rain in the last 2 to 4,000 years. Okay? So we're not just talking arid, we're not even just talking ultra-arid, we're talking science fiction garbage planet ultra-arid here, okay? So we have water scarcity to deal with, and because of the elevation, remember this is the world's highest elevation lake, we have cold to deal with. And we have cold all year around. So this climate is fascinating in that it doesn't have a great deal of seasonality, but it has a huge change in temperature from morning to evening. Okay? And most evenings it will frost regardless of the time of year. So we have a wet season, dry season, slight seasonality, but in both seasons you have overnight frosts. Okay? So what the people did to build this agricultural complex is a combination of digging canals down and building raised beds up. And these are not simply piles of dirt. These are engineered structures. So the lower levels are gravel. Okay, the lower levels of all of these raised beds are gravel. The gravel comes up to the full pool water level of Lake Titicaca. And then once you're above that bankful level, then they are organic soil. The organic soil was excavated from down in these canal trenches. Okay? So these are engineered. So that would allow the water to move underneath the plant roots through this entire raised bed. Okay? But at the same time, the organic soil is built up above so that the plants did not drown. And the agriculture would be some combination of maize and potato growing in this region of the world as the dominant crops. Okay? So that deals with water. Now this water, and the fact that this water can percolate through this entire landscape, gives you another advantage. Water has a lot of thermal mass. Okay? We talked about thermal mass a bit when I was describing the Colorado farm. Now here, we have this unimaginable tonnage of water, all storing heat. Water is the most efficient material on planet Earth for absorbing incoming sunlight and the heat of incoming sunlight. Okay? This is part of why melting ocean ice is such a substantial deal. Ice and snow are the most reflective. Water is the most absorptive surface. So you're replacing the most reflective with the most absorptive. Here, we're deliberately carpeting the landscape with the most absorptive surface. So during the day, this water is going to absorb a tremendous amount of heat energy from the sun and store that overnight. So what this will do is moderate those overnight frosts. So we're using the fact that the water is in communication with the entire landscape to prevent frost from killing our taters. Okay? And killing our corn. So this water is making a microsite that is capable of sustaining plants which would otherwise not be able to grow at this elevation because of the temperature regulation effect of the water. So that's the second thing. So we have the water available for growth because we're bringing the lake into this whole landscape. And then because we have this folded canal structure, we have proximity of the plants to the water for the micro. So we're expanding the lake edge microsite to the entire landscape. Okay. Now, next advantage to this is what happens when rain does fall onto these crop fields. Well, it washes nutrients away. Where does it wash them? Well, directly into the canal. And because of the folded structure of these canals, it's not going to go anywhere that quickly. Okay? So most of the nutrients that wash off of this raised bed are going to end up as sediment right in that canal. So your fertilizer is simply once or twice a year taking a walk in the canal and scooping some of that compost back up onto the beach. So your fertilizer is the sediment in the canal system, which is placed up top. This canal system makes, because we have the nutrients washing into the canals, we have an extremely rich habitat that can grow large amounts of algae and feed an aquatic food web, which then feeds fish, which is also an important part of the food economy of the people. Okay? So we have fish right next to our taters, and you have a tremendous food engine starting to develop. Okay? What makes all of this work? The folding in the landscape. Okay? This folding pattern, you see this in many, many different systems. You see this in the food absorbing structures in your intestines. You see this in the folding of your cerebral cortex in the brain. You see this sort of folded pattern in the gills of a fish, in the alveoli of your lungs. Anytime you see this sort of folded pattern, what you're really doing is emphasizing surface area and contact between two different structures. When you emphasize surface area and contact between two fundamentally different habitats, you will always get an increase in function. What function? Well, that depends on what you're designing for. right? The increase in function, if you have a large amount of surface contact between forest and field, is going to be different from field and water. But whenever you want to emphasize a marginal zone between two habitats, you fold it. Okay? And you see this over and over and over again, this exact pattern over and over and over again in biology to make some of the most complex structures in our body work, or in a fish's body, or, etc. So taking advantage of this folding is maximizing the contact between the water and the land, allowing you to have the temperature modification across the whole landscape instead of just the lake edge. Okay? The interaction in nutrients instead of just the lake edge is across the whole landscape. Okay? And then we can still have habitation in it. This central location is a raised mound, which would have had a seasonal habitation of some sort. The seasonal habitations in this area, in this time period, are typically made out of rush mats, so it's not something that would preserve, right? But the fact that we have this being raised up farther than the rest of the landscape says they were trying to get their feet out of the mud when they were out here during the farming season, living in whatever temporary structure they built there. And, think about a house made out of woven cattail rush. It's fine for a season, maybe even two in a cold climate like this, but it's not going to preserve archaeologically. So we don't, we can't model that, right? We can't model that. Now, application for you and your agricultural design. Obviously, you're probably not going to have a quarter square mile of altiplano and the time, energy, and money to fund developing something this expansive. Right? But you probably do have some way that you can build the concept of folding into your landscape. And if you have water features or lakes and ponds, think about the bank structure. And think about how you can fold that bank structure or build islands to maximize surface area and contact between the land and the water. And then you can take advantage of some of these things to extend growing seasons, make fertilizer more available, capture nutrients as they're running off of your garden, and moderate drought. And you can take these concepts and apply them at the small scale, even though here in this particular model, we're looking at them at a very large scale. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you will continue to watch these permaculture design ideas, and I hope most of all that you will have a wonderful, blessed day, and I will see you in the next edition of Old Ways Rising Farm.